Good evening. The Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Board of Trustees is now convened in the Committee of the Whole meeting on Thursday, September 10th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Instructional Support Center located at 10,300 Jones Road, Houston, Texas, for the purpose of reviewing that portion of the Monday, September 14th, 2020 regular board meeting agenda designated as action items and to hear designated reports and recognitions posted in the meeting notice as required by Texas law. No action will be taken at this meeting. I want to welcome the members of our audience and our television viewers to this meeting of the Board of Trustees. As the Cypress-Fairbanks Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports, approve budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve concerns and issues. This is a public meeting of the Board of Trustees, not a meeting of the public. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items will not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. The meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet in closed session to consider matters duly posted for this meeting as permitted by sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code. These proceedings are airing live on Comcast Channel 16 and the district website. They will also be available as video on demand on the district website following tonight's meeting. For the video to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and that cell phones are turned off or in silent mode. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and for your interest in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize our Community Leadership Committee members who are in attendance this evening, and I think tonight it's just Ryan Irving. Ryan, thank you for being here. We also have a Boy Scout with us tonight, Robert Villagran from Troop 533. He's there in the back. Thank you for being here, Robert. The recognitions, board comments, citizen participation, signing of resolution, and reports portion of the agenda will be presented at the regular board meeting on Monday, September 14th, 2020. I also want to point out that the reason you're stuck with me doing the meeting tonight is that Mr. Covey has a TASB officer meeting, and then also Dr. Ogletree is speaking at a Justice Summit, and both those things were on their calendars, and they could not change them, so they will be with us on Monday evening. At this time, we will proceed with the public comments portion of the agenda. Agenda item 2A, patrons who have duly registered per policy BED local may address the board and make public comments on an agenda item during or before the board's consideration of the item. The board may allow public comment on agenda items at all meetings. The board will continue with the remaining agenda after the registered patrons have had an opportunity to speak. Tonight we have two speakers, and if you would, there's a microphone on my right, your left, wherever you are. And our first speaker is Dr. Sterling Allen. And Dr. Allen, you'll have 2 minutes. And once you begin speaking, that light will turn green, and then it turns yellow with about 30 seconds. So you want to start closing your remarks, and then at red, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and finish.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Here's how I completed my child's How Are You Feeling Today advisory activity. First, logged into Cypher ISD. Second, logged into Schoology. Third, open courses. Fourth, find an open and mislabeled advisory folder. Fifth, open the weekly folder. Sixth, open the daily folder. Seventh, open the assignment. Eighth, read the assignment. 9, Google an emoji. You had to know how to spell and Google the word emoji. 10, download an emoji. You had to know how to download an image off of Google. 11, open the submissions option. 12, determine where to add a file. 13, attempt to drag and drop as instructed by the teacher. 14, determine that you can't drag and drop. 15, upload option. 16, upload the emoji. and 17 submit the assignment. I have a doctorate, and it took me 17 steps using logic, reason, and the ability to read to figure out how to complete the first grade assignment of the day. Friends, Schoology is not working for our younger elementary students. It is a cloud-based file directory with storage and usability hosted by Google Drive. Our children are having to use Zoom for communications, log into MyCFISD, log into Google Drive, get a parent to grant them permission online, log into Seesaw, and then attempt to make sense out of their online assignments. If they have any difficulties, they have to email their tech support and wait. To be clear, I have no doubt that we have the finest curriculum staff in the country, but in a COVID rush, things get overlooked. One size fit all was selected for a very diverse district. Schoology is not working for our younger elementary students. It is my desperate hope that the board will consider making a motion to reevaluate and immediately seek an alternative learning platform for early elementary students.
Thank you,
very
Dr.
much.
Allen. Our next speaker is Stacy Hunter. Mr. Hunter, you might want to go to this one over here, and that way, since that one hadn't been sterilized, I'd appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Hunter, a current resident within the Cypress School District. Last month, on August the 10th, I had the opportunity to speak before the board regarding in-class/in-person learning versus virtual instruction within the school district. In my statement last month, I mentioned, and I quote, "With infection levels as high as 17% at the time of course, a few students might die. Several teachers are going to die. How many teachers have to die from COVID-19 before you, the board, says we should go virtual? Maybe we should go virtual." Do you all remember me saying that? Well, let's review that for a second. Since the last board meeting on August the 10th, as I said last month, several teachers around the country have actually died from COVID-19. For example, Demetria Bannister, age 28, Columbia, South Carolina. Ashley Damaris, age 34, Potosi, Missouri. Nakoma James, age 42, a middle school teacher, Oxford, Mississippi. The list goes on and on. As a matter of fact, the American Federation of Teachers lists 210 union members, including teachers and support staff, that have died from COVID-19 since the start of 2021 school year. 210? I don't know about you, but I don't want my wife to be 211. Again, I ask you, how many teachers within the Cypress School District have to die before you, the board, say, we were wrong? We were terribly wrong. At last month's meeting, a statement was made by our illustrious board president, Mr. Robert Covey, and I quote, it would be really nice as a board member to look out here at every one of our meetings and see that this many people in attendance that are actually interested in what's going on with the board. Well, the reason you don't see that many tonight at the meeting is because in the board members' minds, they're already made up before the meetings takes place, letting everyone know what we really say doesn't matter to us at all. You just want to do your civic duty and allow everyone the opportunity to speak. Let me conclude by saying it's not too late to make this right. Teachers throughout the school district are getting sick before they start dying.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Your time's up. Thank you very much. Before we proceed with the action items portion of the agenda, I would like to let the viewing audience know that each month during the board work session, the administration provides oral reports on various departments in addition to the reports outlined in the district's board monitoring system. The board monitoring system, a mechanism to measure the district's progress in achieving goals, may be viewed on our website under About Us, District Improvement Plan, and Goals. And now we will proceed with the consensus action items portion of the agenda. Agenda item 7A, the board will consider approving the minutes of the August 10th, 2020 meeting. Any questions from board members? Now we'll go to the non-consent portion of the agenda. Agenda item 8A, the board will consider approving the 2020 certified tax rolls and the estimated collection rate for 2020 to be 100% and the 2019 excess debt collections rate to be 0. We don't have a presentation on this, but any questions from board members? May I move that to consent? Are y'all good with that? Great. We're going to move that. Agenda item 8B, the board will consider the 2020 tax rate resolution to support the 2020-2021 maintenance and operations and debt service budgets by setting the 2020 M&O and interest and sinking tax rates. And we have a brief presentation from Karen Smith.
Okay, thank you very much. Tonight, I would like to go over the proposed tax rate for the 2020 school year. So, Mr. Ryan and board members, this information was discussed at the June 30 board meeting. However, there is an update to the information provided to you at that time. The 2020-21 tax rate calculation method is much more complex than it has been in the past. HB3 changed some of the methodology in calculation of the tax rate. Also, in addition to that, as you well know, HB3 was passed right at the end of right before the 2019-2020 school year. There wasn't enough time really to implement certain aspects of that. So some of the items associated with the tax rate were not effective until the 2020-21 school year. First of all, I'd like to go over the maximum compressed rate. In the past, the maximum compressed rate was based on in 1920, the maximum compressed rate was based on the state's compressed rate of 93 cents. This year, the tax rate for the first time was based on the lower of the state compressed rate and the local compressed rate. And I will go into more detail on that in just a moment. In addition, there is a new term called the no new revenue tax rate, which is the old effective tax rate, if you remember that term. This tax rate is the tax rate that would produce the same levy in the coming year as the preceding year. So basically, no new revenue is what that means, exactly what the verbiage says. In addition, you would adjust the prior year for collections for the new exemptions and appeals. So anything that was new that occurred that actually reduced values, those would be adjusted. In addition, for the current year, we remove any new items not on the appraisal roll in the prior year. So, for example, if there was improvements made to property, we annexed property, a house was built, on a piece of vacant land, those kind of items are then removed. So the maximum compressed tax rate, I went over this information at the adoption of the budget, but the M&O tax rate is compressed to the lower of the state compressed rate or the local compressed rate. As a reminder, the state compressed rate for this year was 0.9164, and that was based on an increase of property values of 4.01%. The district's local compressed rate, that was calculated by the district submitting information to the Texas Education Agency based on the changes in their property values as well as their local optional homestead exemption. That information was provided and a compressed rate was calculated for the district by the Texas Education Agency. That compressed rate is 0.9055. Since that was less than the compressed rate of the state, the compressed rate the district will be utilizing is that lower compressed rate. The M&O tax rate is actually made up of this compressed rate plus any enrichment pennies. As I was discussing and explaining the M&O compressed rate, one of the items that affects it is current year property values. Basically, what happens is if the property values grow by more than 2.5% from one year to the next, then the tax rate is compressed so that the taxpayer does not see an increase more than 2.5% associated with their tax payments. The current M&O tax rate, as I mentioned at the previous board meeting, would have decreased whether it had been at the state compressed rate or at the local compressed rate. The tax rate that the district is proposing that was also part of the budget that was presented in June gave us, included the option to add an additional penny to the M&O rate. Previously, prior to HB3, there were 6 golden pennies that districts could access, of which 4 of those golden pennies could be accessed without an election. Now there are 8 golden pennies available to school districts, and we can access 5 without an election. This is the first year that we could access that 5th penny. Currently, the district has 4 golden pennies. And what a golden penny is basically it has more value than, I guess you could say, a typical penny, but the big thing that's golden about it is that if the district was ever subject to recapture, then because we are a property wealthy district, those golden pennies cannot be recaptured. So that's one of the reasons it's called golden. Therefore, the tax rate, including the additional penny, will still be lower than the 2019 M&O tax rate. That was 97 cents, and the recommended tax rate for the M&O would be 0.9555. This additional penny actually provides the district approximately $11 million more in funding, and it's a combination of property tax revenue as well as additional state aid funding because of that golden penny. The adoption of the tax rate does require unanimous board approval to adopt that additional golden penny. So the proposed tax rate, as I indicated, will decrease by 0.0145. The proposed tax rate of 1.3555 is less than the 2019 total tax rate of $1.37. If you recall, I mentioned the no new revenue tax rate. One of the calculations that we're required to do is compare the district's proposed tax rate to the no new revenue tax rate. That no new revenue tax rate is 1.3455. Because of that, even though our tax rate is going down, the district is required to have in the board motion the following item. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.3555, which is effectively a 0.7% increase in the tax rate. In addition, there's another test that is looked at associated with the tax rate. And what that relates to is, did our maintenance collections that we're getting because of the existing values, will it increase in the current year because of, will those collections increase? It has nothing really to do with the tax rate. It is truly looking at last year's M&O tax rate based on the values, then looking at this year's M&O tax rate based on the values. Well, as you well know, values typically increase from year to year. Therefore, if our maintenance and operations collections increase, then we also have to have this additional language in the resolution to adopt the tax rate. And it says that this tax rate will raise more taxes for the maintenance and operations than last year's tax rate. So this is required language associated with both the motion as well as the resolution. But once again, I want to stress, they're requiring this additional language. However, I want to remind you that the total tax rate is going down by 0.0145. Listed here is a history, I showed you this at the June board meeting, but a history of the district's total tax rates. And as you can see, in 2011, the tax rate was $1.43. It later increased to $1.45, then went down to $1.44, and then in 2019, it went down from $1.44 to $1.37, and the proposed tax rate we're bringing to you tonight will decrease again to $1.35.55. So during the time that I believe Dr. Henry actually joined the district in 2011, the tax rate has gone down consistently. So the proposed tax rate that we are bringing to you tonight is a maintenance and operations rate of .9555 and an interest and sinking rate of 40 cents for a total tax rate of $1.3555. Now I'm available to answer any questions that you may have associated with the presentation, the tax rate, and also I provided you additional information going into a little bit more detail along with the PowerPoint.
Any questions from board members? Tom?
Thank you for a thorough and detailed presentation again. And you are correct, you have presented the information to us before, which has given us time to think about this, and this is not something that we take lightly. What are your three best reasons why this should be approved from your perspective?
First of all, the district will be able to access additional revenue, which will ultimately benefit students while decreasing the tax rate for our taxpayers. And this only really occurs when there's further compression of the tax rate. So number one, that would be one of the reasons. The other is due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the oil and gas crisis, districts fully expect during the next legislative session that tough decisions will have to be made. So we fully expect that there will be a decrease possibly in funding for school districts, similar to the last economic crisis that occurred. It did not happen the first year, I guess you could say, right after the initial crisis, but the next 2 years after that were very, very costly to school districts. If you recall, Cypress-Fairbanks had a decrease in funding of $47 million. So this will help offset that decrease. The other is that the adopted budget included a deficit of $39.8 million, and this additional funding helped reduce that deficit to not be more than $39.8 million.
I have an uncomfortable follow-up question, but it has to be asked. So when you made the presentation previously, and we did talk about the $39 million deficit, you indicated that that number, or you inferred that it was very conservative, that it did include $10 million set aside for potential COVID cost. And I raised the point in public meeting that if it were overly conservative, I asked from a rhetorical perspective why we needed to consider changing the tax rate. So let me ask that question to you. If we are overly conservative, and if we don't think we'll use all 10 million of the COVID set aside, why should we consider approval of this?
That's a good question, Mr. Jackson. And actually, I think, and I may not have been clear in my presentation, but what I was saying is the entire budget was conservative, not the COVID $10 million. I remember also Mr. Ryan asked a question about the $10 million and saying, is that overestimating? Is it underestimating? Do you know? Of course, at the time, we had no way of knowing what would happen and how long this pandemic would last and what would be required to get children back in school. As a result of that, I would say the 10 million is not conservative in that there's items that we utilize that 10 million for already, such as providing internet access with the LTE hotspots. That internet access has to be paid for out of M&O funds. In addition, we also had costs associated with the plexiglass that we were putting up in the classrooms. And we've needed more of that than we had anticipated. And so our cost right now associated, basically that 10 million is gone. And so it is, that part was, we estimated the best we could. We still anticipate that we may have additional sub-costs. We do have a hold harmless associated with ADA for the first 6 weeks. However, we honestly don't know what will happen with all of that. So I would say that things have changed, and it's lasted longer than we had anticipated that it would last. Therefore, I would say that those funds very well may be needed, as well as I want to stress again that we're anticipating cuts in funding in the future years. Whether, how much that'll be, we don't know. So that money will be very beneficial to help offset during that time.
Thank you for the explanation. My personal view then in June, and it still is, that the $10 million set aside was not enough. I think that there are costs that cannot be anticipated, particularly labor cost, that will have a impact on us that we just won't know until we go through this. I have no doubt that we will have starts and stops. If you have any starts and stops, there are attendant costs that simply escalate. But I think you have, in fact, answered the rhetorical question that I asked in June, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Julie?
Karen, thank you for your thorough explanation. It's very complex. We've talked in the past that we were hoping that HB3 would simplify school finance in the state of Texas, and that did not happen, although we are grateful for some additional funding that was committed to public schools. We're hoping that will actually come to fruition. Also, we often talk about local control and how local school boards strive to have local control to best represent their constituents and their local citizens. And it's a challenge when so much is driven by the state, including our tax rate. So we're doing the best we can within the parameters that we're given to set a tax rate that satisfies our core mission to educate our children, but also to respect and serve our taxpayers as well. Can you please share, just in case some folks don't understand or are not aware of the impact that our optional homestead exemption has for our local taxpayers? That's something I think sometimes I know we take for granted that the school district offers to taxpayers, but that's not something that's available to everyone. But it has an impact on our ability to have funding for our schools.
That's a great question. And the district has a 20% optional homestead exemption. So whenever you're calculating your property taxes due, so let's just say that you have a $200,000 home, and you're calculating what that would be. First, you take 80% of that to get rid of the optional homestead exemption. Then you would apply the state mandated exemption of $25,000, and then the taxes would be calculated on that. If you're in a district that does not have an optional homestead exemption, then you would have that $200,000 minus the $25,000, and your tax rate is calculated on that. So our taxpayers benefit by a reduction of 20% of your values before calculating your property tax rates.
Just a quick follow-up to that. And does the state continue to penalize Cypher ISD for offering an optional homestead exemption to our taxpayers?
The way this works is that when our state aid is calculated, one of the things it looks at is it evens out. It goes back. It evens out. But what happens is that the comptroller rate that's utilized does not take into consideration that we have an optional homestead exemption. But where it hurts us, I guess you could say, and it's not made up for, so it's really not through state aid, is the fact that we actually collect less taxes because we have an optional homestead exemption. Does that make sense? Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Blackshear?
Just a comment, just reminding our taxpayers that even though we passed a bond in 2014 and 2019, our tax rate has been reduced instead of gone up each time.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Karen, so I'm just curious here. Our tax rate is going down 0.0145.
Correct.
And then we're going to have a motion. And in that motion, we're going to say, I move that the property tax rate be increased. Who's the brain surgeon that came up with that?
It is
It's so
actually.
it's
I know,
so
it
misleading
is,
to the
I
public.
agree.
It's so misleading.
It is in law. It is actually in the property tax code that we have to adopt that, utilize that language. One of the things that I included in the language in addition to that was that we were adopting a tax rate that's referenced in the resolution. But that tax rate is going down, as you said, and it's very misleading. But they're looking at it saying that, they look at it to say, we have no new revenue. And that's why they're requiring the language.
Okay.
Is that, I assume, coming from our legislature?
Yes, yes. And it's supposed to be related to transparency associated with taxes, but as you can well see, it's very complicated and confusing.
Okay, if there are no more questions, Karen, thank you very much.
welcome.
That was a great presentation. And it's not, you didn't write that motion, so it's not your fault.
Yes.
And I hope you didn't take it that way.
Oh, I know, and that's why I wanted to do the presentation.
I have a quick.
No, I'm glad you did.
Can we add our
you
own
like-
verbiage to that resolution to explain that the terminology that is included in this resolution is driven by the tax code, but when in reality, the tax rate is not increasing, even though we're saying it's an increase, it's actually not an increase? And it says we're raising taxes, but we're actually not raising taxes? Can we add our own language?
I would like to ask, Marnie, sometimes, the way they showed it, is the language is it's in quotes. And it's my understanding, anytime it's in quotes, there's things that you have to have in there. But I have heard of other districts adding additional language, so I guess.
Could we have a footnote?
I'll look at it with Karen. I mean, we don't have to, sorry, I dropped my stuff, have the motion for you until Monday, but I think the point is well taken. The resolution says you have to have certain things. It doesn't say this is the only thing you can say, in part because it wouldn't be accurate.
Right.
And
Yes.
so I think to keep from being confusing, it probably would be wise to maybe specifically state what the tax rate is actually.
Right. Okay.
You want to check on that, and then we'll get back to it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because,
Karen and I'll get together on it tomorrow.
Okay,
Monday.
For example, on a $200,000 home, the tax bill will actually go down $20. So it is very confusing.
Well, and oftentimes, for those of us that have sat on the board, is that a lot of the, I guess, feedback that you may get are, my taxes are too high, even though we've lowered them consistently. So it's not necessarily our tax rate as much as their property values going up.
You are correct.
And so when we come out and we're saying we're lowering the taxes, and then we have some lame motion, it just misleads everybody. And anything we could do to at least remove some of the mud would be awesome. Okay, we'll work on that and
Okay.
get back to that Monday. And I would like to leave that as non-consent.
Yes.
Y'all good with that? Okay.
Non-consent.
Agenda item 8C, the board will consider approving the 2020-2021 Cypress-Fairbanks ISD Student Code of Conduct. And we have a brief presentation, I believe, from Dr. Ogumake and Dr. Stewart. Just Dr. Ogumake. Okay.
We're excited to bring to you the revisions for the, 2021 Student Code of Conduct. Because this is not a legislative year, there have not been any major changes. Most of those changes are edits, clarification, and formatting. But Iffy, it's your show.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Stewart. Good evening, Dr. Henry, Board of Trustees. Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code requires that each school district adopts a student code of conduct each year that has been reviewed and updated based on input from stakeholders that include students, parents, staff, and community members. This year, as Dr. Stewart just shared, there are no major changes to the code. Revisions involved editing and formatting enhancements to improve the readability of the document. Parents are asked to acknowledge receipt of the code when they complete the annual student information update. To ensure that our code is available to our community in various ways, we have it online on our website, on the campus website, and we also have paper copies that can be accessed at every campus upon request. To help our students understand expectations for behaviors, APs also conduct code of conduct presentations in the fall and spring semesters. Also, parents are encouraged to review the code with their students. I am excited to share that this year we partnered with our awesome communications department to create a short, about 3-minute video, which will be placed online for our community to access and also for our campuses to use when they do their presentations. We have an elementary and a secondary version. We're very excited about this, so if you will indulge me, this is the elementary version.
Hi everyone, we are excited to help parents and students understand the Student Code of Conduct and the Student Handbook. The Student Handbook tells us all about the district's procedures and policies. You can find both items in our website under the Parents and Students tab. The Student Code of Conduct, which is approved by our CFISD Board of Trustees, tells us the expectations for our student behavior management techniques, and the consequences. The information in both code and handbook is reviewed every year by parents, students, and district personnel.
Let's start with the student handbook. It gives us the information about how the school day goes. First, the student handbook gives us information applying to how our school day operates. You can find the school calendar and the campus directory.
You can find our district's vision statement, learn, empower, achieve, dream, and lead.
Our mission statement, the district shall maximize every student's potential through rigorous and relevant learning experiences, preparing students to be 21st century global leaders. The handbook has important information such as attendance, admission requirements, dress code, campus technology policies, and more. This is helpful for all of us, students, parents, and staff.
CFISD has a great environment where we care for each other. We are expected to follow the elementary safety pledge each and every day.
I want my school to be the place where all students feel safe and treat each other with respect. I will keep my hands and feet to myself and not touch personal belongings of others. I will not bully, tease, or hurt anyone. If I hear or see bullying, cyberbullying, or teasing, I will tell the person to stop and report it to an adult. I will tell an adult right away if I hear anyone threaten another person. I will immediately tell an adult if a student brings something to school that could hurt someone. The Student Code of Conduct has 5 levels of misconduct. All are listed and should be reviewed by you and your parent.
If an act of misconduct takes place, it would be classified into one of the 5 levels, and disciplinary action will be assigned by the classroom teacher or campus administrator.
There are 6 factors that are considered by the administrator when assigning disciplinary action. Those are also listed in the Student Code of Conduct and should be reviewed by both parents and students. A student's principal has the final authority in those disciplinary actions. We urge you to look at all 5 levels of misconduct that are listed and see what infractions constitute what type of consequence. It's very important that you and your child review this information. Once again, you can find the Student Handbook and Code of Conduct on the CFISD website.
With your support and encouragement, we all know that your student will follow these expectations.
Together, we can achieve the district's goal of a safe, disciplined, and healthy environment for all students and staff.
They did an awesome job. We're proud of them. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I think our students, did a great job just giving an overview of the code. We're very excited about this addition.
Thank you, Iffy. That is a great video, by the way. Any questions from board members? Debbie?
Dr., or Ms. Gumake, on the, I see on my place here a COVID mask addendum. So is that part of the student code of conduct? Okay,
Yes.
okay, very good.
Any other questions? Tom?
What other changes did you make to the student code of conduct reflecting the fact that COVID-19 is present and evidently is going to be present with us the entire school year?
I think the change that you will notice when all through the code is that we have defined classroom to be face-to-face and remote for our students who are on CFISD Connect. So that is evident all through the code. As students eloquently put out there, we've also added a couple of statements to the safety pledge and the expectations about personal safety and keeping your hands to yourself. We've also added on CC12 remote learning etiquette for our students who are on CFISD Connect, just to remind them of expectations for behavior when they're learning online. So those are some that come to mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, did you have a question, Julie? Okay. Is that the video is a great idea. It really is awesome, because that way a lot of families can just click on. Because, I mean, as a parent, I'm going to be honest, we didn't really read through that whole student code of conduct deal. It's, thank goodness my parents didn't either. Is that video in different languages too, or subtitles or something that they, so since we have so many different languages?
We always try to have it in English and in Spanish. So
Fantastic.
we're working on that, yes.
That really is a great idea that y'all came
Working
up
on
with.
that.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Tom, you have one more?
One more follow-up question. I'm sure that parents are required to sign this and turn the signature page back in to the teacher. How do they sign it if their child is on Connect?
Well, that's another addition that we have this year. Beginning this year, we have, we've gone online. All our registration is online. So part of that registration process is we have the annual student update, where parents have to go in and update their children's personal information. And part of that process is acknowledging electronically that they know they have access to the code online. If they want a hard copy, they can always call. So that's now done electronically.
So it's similar to what's being done in the business world, where you have DocuSign. So we can, in fact, collect all the electronic signatures, and the old excuse of a student saying, I forgot to bring it with me, doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no more questions, without anyone's objection, I'd like to move that to consent as well. That takes us to agenda item 8D. The board will consider awarding bids and contracts and/or authorizing purchase orders as recommended in the posted agenda item. Number 1, CFISD printer quote. 2, district-wide copiers lease. 3, print center lease. 4, external website design, content management, and web hosting services. 5, internal website design, content management, and web hosting services. 6, concrete installation, demolition, and bollards. 7, HVAC parts and supplies. 8, insulation services. 9, plumbing fixtures, parts, and supplies. 10, recovering movable air walls and gyp walls for the Berry Center. Any questions from board members? I'd like to move that to consent as well. Agenda item 8E, the board will consider the approval and execution of the plat for the CFISD Holbrook Elementary School. This is questions only for Mr. Sprague. Are there any questions? If none, I'd like to move that to consent as well. And that concludes our meeting for the evening. We are adjourned. We can go watch a little football tonight.